Ethan Thompson's mornings usually started before dawn, the hum of his garbage truck echoing through the quiet streets of Ohio. On this particular morning, the mist clung to the ground, adding a layer of chill that seeped into his bones. As he drove along his usual route, something unusual caught his eye. At the edge of the road, barely visible through the fog, was a figure huddled on the ground. His heart skipped a beat as he pulled over, curiosity and concern battling within him. Stepping out of the truck, Ethan approached cautiously. The figure was a young woman, her clothes tattered and her hair matted. She looked up at him with wide, fearful eyes, and he could see the desperation etched into her face. She was trembling, not just from the cold, but from something deeper, something that had shattered her spirit. Ethan's heart ached for her, a stranger who seemed to embody all the pain and loneliness he had ever known. "Hey, are you okay?" Ethan's voice was gentle, trying not to scare her. The girl didn't respond at first, just stared at him with those haunted eyes. He could see she was on the brink, teetering on the edge of giving up. He couldn't just leave her there, not when she needed help so desperately. "My name's Ethan. I want to help you." Emily, as he later learned her name, finally spoke, her voice barely a whisper. "I don't have anywhere to go." Those words hit Ethan like a punch to the gut. He knew that kind of hopelessness, had felt it himself when he was younger, struggling to make ends meet after his father left. There was something in her eyes that mirrored his own past, and he couldn't walk away from that. With a gentle hand, he helped her up, feeling how frail she was. Come on, you can stay with me and my mom until we figure something out," he offered, his voice filled with determination. Emily hesitated, her trust worn thin by too many broken promises, but eventually she nodded. Ethan led her to the truck, his mind racing with questions and a growing resolve to protect this fragile stranger. The drive home was silent, the weight of Emily's presence filling the small cab. Ethan's mind was a whirlwind of thoughts. Who was she? What had happened to her? He glanced at her occasionally, noting the exhaustion and fear that seemed to radiate from her. He wanted to say something, anything to make her feel safe, but words felt inadequate in the face of such raw pain. When they arrived at his small modest home, his mother Laura was waiting. She took one look at Emily and instantly understood. With the compassion only a mother could muster, she welcomed Emily in, offering her a warm meal and a place to rest. As they settled her in, Ethan couldn't help but feel a surge of protectiveness. This girl, broken and lost, had ignited something in him, a desire to help, to heal, to make things right. That night, as he lay in bed, Ethan couldn't stop thinking about Emily. There was a long road ahead, filled with uncertainties and challenges, but he knew one thing for sure, he wouldn't let her face it alone. He had found her at her lowest, and now, he was determined to help her rise again. The next morning, Ethan found himself at the kitchen table, watching Emily as she cautiously ate breakfast. Laura had prepared a feast, clearly hoping to provide some comfort through food. Emily's hands trembled slightly as she lifted the fork to her lips, and Ethan could see the shadows under her eyes, remnants of sleepless nights and relentless fears. Thank you," Emily murmured, her voice still fragile. Ethan's heart ached for her, wanting to ease her burden but unsure how. He exchanged a glance with Laura, who nodded subtly. They both knew this would be a delicate process, one requiring patience and empathy. Over the next few days, Emily began to open up, sharing snippets of her past. Each revelation was like a knife to Ethan's heart. She spoke of being abandoned by her father, Robert Brooks, a name that struck a chord of recognition. The Brooks family was well known in the area, wealthy and influential. Ethan felt a surge of anger on her behalf, unable to comprehend how someone could forsake their own child. As Emily shared her story, the bond between them deepened. Ethan found himself drawn to her resilience, despite the immense pain she had endured. He admired her strength, even as she struggled to trust and rebuild her life. Their late-night conversations became a lifeline for both of them, offering solace and understanding in a world that had often seemed cruel and indifferent. One evening, Emily revealed the full extent of her ordeal, the abuse she had suffered at the hands of those she thought she could trust. Her voice broke as she recounted the details, and Ethan felt a white-hot rage course through him. He wanted to protect her, to shield her from any more harm, but he also knew that healing would take time and that she needed more than just his anger. Determined to help her find some semblance of peace, Ethan began researching ways to contact her father, despite Emily's protests. He believed that reconciling with Robert, or at least confronting him, could provide some closure. It was a risky move, one fraught with emotional peril, but Ethan felt it was necessary for Emily's healing. As they navigated this turbulent journey together, Ethan couldn't help but notice the small moments of joy that began to emerge. Emily's laughter, rare but genuine, became a beacon of hope. Each step forward, no matter how small, was a victory. And through it all, Ethan's feelings for Emily grew stronger, intertwined with a fierce determination to see her whole again. Ethan's heart pounded as he dialed Robert Brooks' number, the phone feeling heavy in his hand. Emily had finally agreed, albeit reluctantly, to let him reach out to her father. When Robert's voice answered on the other end, Ethan felt a surge of anger but kept his tone steady. Mr. Brooks, my name is Ethan Thompson. I have your daughter, Emily, with me. She needs your help. The silence on the other end was palpable. Finally, Robert spoke, his voice tinged with shock and guilt. Emily? Where is she? Is she okay? Ethan could hear the emotion in Robert's voice and felt a flicker of hope. Maybe this was the beginning of something positive for Emily. A few days later, a sleek black car pulled up to Ethan's modest home. Robert Brooks stepped out, his face a mask of concern and regret. Emily stood at the window, watching nervously. Ethan reached for her hand, giving it a reassuring squeeze. You don't have to do this alone, he whispered. Together, they went to meet Robert. The reunion was awkward and tense. Robert's eyes filled with tears as he saw the state Emily was in. I'm so sorry, Emily. I never wanted this for you, he said, his voice breaking. Emily looked at him, torn between anger and longing. Ethan watched the scene unfold, his heart aching for her. He hoped that this encounter would be the start of healing for Emily, even if it was painful. To Ethan's surprise, Robert offered him a job. You've done more for my daughter than I ever did. Let me help you in return. Come work for me as my personal driver, he said. Ethan was taken aback by the offer. It was a chance to provide a better life for his mother and himself, but he hesitated, unsure of stepping into the Brooks world. Laura, ever the pragmatist, encouraged Ethan to accept. This could be a fresh start for all of us, she said. With Emily's hesitant blessing, Ethan agreed. The move to the Brooks estate was a whirlwind. Ethan and Laura were thrust into a world of luxury that felt alien and overwhelming, but they adapted, grateful for the opportunity. As Ethan settled into his new role, he found himself constantly worried about Emily. She was navigating her own challenges, trying to reconnect with her father while grappling with the traumas of her past. They leaned on each other for support, their bond growing stronger. Ethan admired Emily's bravery, even as she struggled to find her place in this new reality. The transition was anything but smooth. Ethan faced skepticism and condescension from the staff at the estate, who viewed him as an outsider. Yet, he remained focused, determined to prove himself. His primary concern, however, was always Emily. He vowed to be there for her, no matter what. As they navigated this new chapter, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that more challenges lay ahead, but he was ready to face them with Emily by his side. Life at the Brooks estate was a far cry from the modest existence Ethan and Laura had known. The sprawling mansion, with its meticulously maintained gardens and lavish interiors, felt like a different world. Ethan found himself in a whirlwind of new responsibilities as Robert's personal driver, navigating a realm of wealth and privilege that often left him feeling like an outsider. Emily, meanwhile, was struggling with her own set of challenges. Reconnecting with her father was fraught with emotional landmines. Robert was genuinely trying to make amends, but the wounds from his abandonment ran deep. Emily's heart was a battlefield of resentment and yearning, and Ethan could see the toll it was taking on her. One evening, after a particularly tense dinner with her father, Emily sought refuge in the garden. Ethan found her sitting on a stone bench, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. He sat beside her, the cool night air wrapping around them. It's so hard, as she whispered. I don't know if I can ever forgive him. Ethan's heart ached for her. He put a comforting arm around her shoulders. You don't have to decide that now, he said gently. A healing takes time. And it's okay to feel angry. Just know that you're not alone in this. Emily leaned into him, drawing strength from his presence. In that moment, the bond between them felt unbreakable. Their relationship continued to deepen, but it wasn't without its complications. Ethan found himself falling for Emily, his feelings growing stronger with each passing day. Yet, he hesitated to confess his love, fearing it would add to her burden. Emily, too, was grappling with her own emotions, torn between the safety she felt with Ethan and the chaos of her unresolved past. As weeks turned into months, the tension in the Brooks household simmered. Emily's attempts to build a new relationship with her father were met with mixed success. Robert was sincere in his efforts, but old habits and unresolved guilt often led to clashes. Each argument left Emily more exhausted, and Ethan more determined to support her. Then came a turning point. One afternoon, while driving Robert to a business meeting, Ethan seized the opportunity to speak candidly. Sir, I know it's not my place, but Emily is struggling. She needs more than just your apologies. She needs to see that you're willing to change, to truly be there for her. Robert was silent for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Finally, he nodded, a look of resolve in his eyes. You're right, Ethan. I need to do more. That night, Robert approached Emily with a plan to attend family therapy together, a gesture that both surprised and moved her. It was a small step, but a significant one. Ethan watched as Emily's eyes filled with cautious hope. There was still a long road ahead, but for the first time, it felt like they were moving in the right direction. As Ethan lay in bed that night, he couldn't shake the mixture of hope and anxiety that filled him. Their journey was far from over, and the challenges ahead were daunting. But with Emily by his side, and the tentative steps toward healing underway, he felt a glimmer of optimism. Together, they would face whatever came next, one day at a time. Ethan felt a knot of tension tightening in his chest as he watched Emily and Robert enter the therapist's office together. It was their first session, and while he was hopeful, he couldn't shake the unease that had settled over him. He knew this journey wouldn't be easy, and there was a part of him that worried about what might come to light during these sessions. As the weeks went by, therapy brought both breakthroughs and setbacks. Emily began to open up about her past, her voice often cracking with emotion as she recounted the abandonment and betrayal she felt. Robert listened, his face a mask of sorrow and regret. There were moments of connection, but also of intense conflict. The process was raw and painful, leaving everyone involved emotionally drained. One evening, after a particularly grueling session, Emily confided in Ethan about a secret she had been carrying for years. "There's something I haven't told anyone," as she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Ethan's heart pounded as he listened. Before my father left, there were incidents. Things he doesn't know I saw. Things that made me feel unsafe. Ethan's blood ran cold. The implication of her words was clear. "Emily, you need to tell the therapist about this," he urged gently. Emily nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I know. I'm just so scared." Ethan held her close, his mind racing with anger and protectiveness. He vowed to stand by her side, no matter what revelations came to light. The next therapy session was a turning point. Emily bravely shared her darkest memories, the room thick with tension as she spoke. Robert was visibly shaken, his face pale as he absorbed the weight of her words. "I had no idea," he said, his voice breaking. "I'm so sorry, Emily. I failed you in ways I can't even comprehend." Emily's eyes were filled with a mix of anger and relief. It was a painful moment, but a necessary one. As they left the therapist's office, Ethan felt a sense of foreboding. Emily's revelations had opened a Pandora's box, and he knew there would be repercussions. That night, he found it hard to sleep, his mind churning with worry for Emily. She had faced her demons with incredible bravery, but the path ahead was uncertain and fraught with danger. The next few days were a blur of emotional turmoil. Emily struggled with the aftermath of her confession, while Robert was consumed with guilt and determination to make amends. Ethan found himself caught in the middle, trying to support both of them while grappling with his own feelings of helplessness. His love for Emily deepened, but so did his fear for her well-being. Then, out of the blue, a letter arrived at the Brooks estate. It was from an old associate of Robert's, someone with a dark history and a vendetta. The contents of the letter were threatening, hinting at secrets that Robert had long buried. Ethan read it with a growing sense of dread. He knew that this was just the beginning, that the past was not done with them yet. As the tension mounted, Ethan and Emily clung to each other for support. The secrets that had come to light were threatening to unravel everything they had built. Yet, amidst the uncertainty and fear, there was a glimmer of hope. They had faced the darkness together, and they would continue to do so, no matter what lay ahead. The days following the letter's arrival were marked by an oppressive tension that hung over the Brooks estate. Ethan could feel the anxiety gnawing at him as he tried to go about his duties, his thoughts constantly drifting back to Emily and the threat that loomed over them. Emily, too, was on edge, her already fragile sense of security shattered by the ominous message. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the estate, Ethan found Emily pacing in the garden. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with fear. "I can't shake the feeling that something terrible is about to happen," as she confessed, her voice trembling. Ethan pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly. "We'll get through this, Emily. We have to stay strong." That night, a sense of dread kept Ethan awake. He lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, every sound amplified in the stillness of the house. Just as he began to drift off, a loud crash echoed through the halls, followed by shouting. His heart racing, Ethan leapt from his bed and ran toward the commotion, fearing the worst. He found Robert in his study, standing amidst shattered glass and overturned furniture. The letter had been nailed to the door, a final warning from his old associate. "I thought I could leave the past behind," Robert said, his voice thick with despair. "But it seems I was wrong. And now it's putting all of you in danger." Ethan felt a surge of anger. "We won't let him win. We need to go to the police. Robert nodded, his face drawn and weary. You're right. It's time to face this head-on. They contacted the authorities, who promised to investigate the threats. But even with the police involved, the tension didn't dissipate. The fear of the unknown, of what might come next, hung over them like a dark cloud. As days turned into a week, the threat grew more tangible. Ethan was constantly on high alert, his protective instincts kicking into overdrive. He barely left Emily's side, determined to keep her safe. Yet, despite his vigilance, an encounter with a shadow of Robert's past was inevitable. One night, as they were returning from a trip to town, a car sped toward them, forcing Ethan to swerve off the road. The vehicle's occupants fled, leaving behind a chilling message: they were being watched. The attack shook them to their core. Emily was terrified, and Ethan's fear for her safety intensified. We can't keep living like this, as she said, her voice shaking. I'm scared, Ethan. I don't know what to do. He took her hands in his, looking into her eyes with fierce determination. We'll find a way, Emily. We won't let them break us. That night, as they huddled together, Ethan felt the weight of their situation pressing down on him. They were at a breaking point, the tension and fear threatening to consume them. But even in the darkest moments, there was a glimmer of hope. They had each other, and their bond was stronger than ever. They would face this challenge together, no matter what. The climax of their ordeal was imminent, and Ethan knew that the coming days would be crucial. They had to stay vigilant, to trust in each other and the strength of their connection. The road ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear: they would fight for their future, for the chance to build a life free from fear. And in that resolve, Ethan found a renewed sense of purpose, ready to confront whatever came next. The morning after the attack, Ethan and Emily were summoned to a police meeting. Detective Harris, a seasoned officer with a determined look in his eyes, had taken their case to heart. We've tracked down the associate, he said. It's going to be dangerous, but we need you both to help us set a trap. Are you up for it? Ethan felt a surge of resolve. We'll do whatever it takes, he replied, gripping Emily's hand tightly. Emily nodded, fear and determination mingling in her eyes. They had come too far to back down now. Together, they devised a plan to lure the associate into the open, hoping to finally put an end to the threats that had haunted them. The plan was set for the following evening. Ethan and Emily were to meet the associate in a secluded part of town, with the police lying in wait. As they drove to the rendezvous point, the tension in the car was palpable. Emily's hand was cold in his, and Ethan could feel his own heart racing. Stay close to me, he whispered. We'll get through this. When they arrived, the atmosphere was eerie. The streetlights cast long shadows, and the silence was oppressive. Suddenly, a car approached, its headlights blinding. The associate stepped out, a sinister grin on his face. You thought you could escape your past, Robert? He sneered, his eyes darting to Emily. Your mistakes have a way of catching up. Ethan's fury surged, but he kept his composure, knowing the police were waiting. It's over, he said firmly. You're not going to hurt anyone anymore. The associate laughed, pulling a gun from his coat. Emily gasped, and Ethan stepped in front of her protectively, his heart pounding in his ears. Just then, a shout rang out, and the police moved in, surrounding the associate. In the chaos that followed, shots were fired, and the associate was subdued. Emily clung to Ethan, trembling, as Detective Harris approached. You did it, he said, relief evident in his voice. He's in custody. It's over. Ethan felt the tension drain from his body, and he held Emily close, overwhelmed by the enormity of what they had just faced. The days that followed were a blur of statements and court proceedings, but through it all, Ethan and Emily remained steadfastly by each other's side. The Brooks estate slowly returned to a semblance of normalcy, the shadows of the past beginning to lift. Robert, too, was undergoing a transformation, his determination to make amends stronger than ever. As the dust settled, Ethan and Emily found themselves in the garden, where so much had changed. I can't believe it's finally over, Emily said, her voice filled with a mixture of relief and exhaustion. Ethan took her hand, his heart swelling with love and pride. We faced it together, he said softly. And we came out stronger. In the weeks that followed, they began to rebuild their lives. Emily's relationship with her father slowly mended, each day a step toward healing. Ethan, too, found a new sense of purpose, his love for Emily deepening with every shared moment. They had been through the fire, and now, standing on the other side, they were ready to embrace the future. One evening, as they watched the sunset, Ethan turned to Emily, his heart full. I love you, Emily, he said, his voice trembling with emotion. I've loved you since the day I found you on that road. And I will love you for the rest of my life. Tears filled Emily's eyes as she smiled, her hand finding his. I love you too, Ethan. Thank you for saving me in more ways than one. With those words, they sealed their bond, ready to face whatever came next. Together, they had overcome unimaginable challenges, and together, they would build a future filled with love, hope, and endless possibilities. The past had tried to break them, but their love had only grown stronger, and now, nothing could stand in their way.